Hey everyone, it's the Unlikely Prepper here, and I am doing my first video on soap making. Now obviously you'll see we're not in the kitchen, because I think there's a lot of things that I need to explain to you that you need to know before you even step foot in the kitchen. The most basic thing is, what is soap making? Soap making is essentially saponification, and saponification in its easiest terms is turning fatty acids and oils into soap with the help of caustic soda, which is also known as lye, which is also known as sodium or potassium hydroxide, depending on what process you plan on going on, which I'll explain a little bit more after. The most important things that you can do is set up recipes for yourself before you even start to try to make anything, because those recipes will be the basis of what you're doing. And the second is to make sure that you're being safe about what you're doing. So the recipes that you make, I would recommend having one that you work with now before anything happens, and having a secondary recipe in place of materials that you can get a hold of, whether that be tallow from whatever you have near you, whether that be beef, pig, sheep, goat, deer, lard, tallow. These are all usable tallows. Those are probably going to be the most readily available thing. But then from there, do sunflowers grow in your area? Sunflower seed oil works. If you're more towards the south, you'll probably have access to soybeans and palm oil. Palm oil is a very popular one. If you happen to be near coconut trees, you could probably do coconut oil. It's another huge one there. And there's multiple things from a coconut that you can use. Coconut milk is actually a great thing to use in place of water. But I'll explain much more of that later, so don't worry about that now. Make sure that you have a recipe of things that are actually available to you. Here in Massachusetts, I'm not going to have access to coconut oil. I'm not going to have access to palm oil because palm trees don't grow around here, and nor do coconut trees. So I have been working in it, and I'm still trying to get all the kinks out of figuring out what recipe will work for me. As of now, I've been flip-flopping. I think I probably could grow soy here. I know sunflower seed is seasonally grown here, so I could probably do that. And I know I have access to tallow. So those are probably some of the only things that I'm going to be able to work with, but those of you that are in the south or on the west coast, you'll have more options. Olive oil. West Coast people, olive oil is one of the easiest things that you can use. Actually, Bastille soap, which is very well known, coming from the Bastille region of France, is 100% olive oil soap. You can make 100% tallow soap. It cannot be from pig. I have researched, and I think that just about sheep works okay, but beef is the best. I still need to find somebody locally that has cows. I've driven around a little bit, and it doesn't seem like anybody within a 2-mile radius has cows, so gonna have to figure out where I'd be able to get that from, but I could probably try to get it from other locations. Deer is another option. Unfortunately, I don't know if you've taken close look at deer compared to cow, but there's significantly less fat on them than there are on cows, so I would have to get more deer to equal up enough tallow to create a soap. So make sure that these are things that you already have on hand. I will do an entire video on how to create your recipe. That'll get posted up as well. I apologize, I've been yawning all day. I promise it's not you. So these are basic materials necessary. Now, there are probably 3 to 4 different ways of making soap. One is your most basic melt and pour. It is not your traditional soap. It is not made with lye initially. It's, in factory it is, but when you receive it, you essentially put it in the microwave, melt it down, pour it, and you make a glycerin soap out of it. Very basic, very rudimentary. I don't love it. I don't love the way it feels. I don't like the way that it leaves my skin feeling. However, it works. For the purposes needed, it does work. Your next most basic are lye-based soaps. Cold process soap is used with sodium hydroxate, and that soap can be done two different ways. There is cold process, which does not require any heating whatsoever. It is simply mixing lye with water, heating the oils and or fats necessary, and then mixing those two together, blending them well, letting them come to what is called a trace, which means that you can trace lightly a stream of the soap over the top and it leaves an indentation. It's the viscosity and the thickness of the soap at the time that you would want to be pouring. There's light trace, there's heavy trace, and that's essentially cold process. It goes into a mold, it's done. Hot process is cold process mixed together but then put into a heating source, typically a crock pot, and heated up. A lot of the water is evaporated out and the lye is processed and heated to a point where it's not still caustic at that point when it's molded. However, it is thicker when it's molded. There's less that can be done with it. It's not very decorative soap. It's fairly rudimentary, and if you don't have electricity and you don't have a crock pot, kind of hard to do it. But I do plan on trying out doing it processed within a pan on a heat source to see how I could go about that. I'm researching it right now to even see if it's possible, if anybody's ever done it before. Typically, I'd say your regular cold process is going to be what you do. There is a third hybrid that's cold process, CP soap. Hot process is HP, hot process soap. And there is one that's called CPOP, which is cold process oven processed, which means that they have taken it, they've done it the exact way that they'd make cold process. When they get done with it, they take those molds and they put them in the oven, and they, at a low temperature, I believe it's 170, they heat it for a few hours to evaporate some of the water out to process the lye. It's said that it will, and once again I apologize for yawning on you, it is said that you'll have less of a turnover time on it. Typically with cold process soap, you're going to want it to cure for 4 weeks. 4 weeks to evaporate out enough to use it and have that bar not fall apart on you. Typically for only the first, I'd say 48 hours, 1 week to be safe, it will have lye in it. The thinner that you cut your slices of soap, the more evaporating you're going to have, and the more that you're going to allow the lye to process out and aerate out of it. When it is used at 4 weeks, there is no lye left in it. It is not a danger to the skin. It has done all of its processing in that amount of time. So you're not putting lye on your body at any point. So you have those types of soap. Typically cold process, oven process soap, they say it's safe at 2 weeks. I still would never use it at that point. I would do 3 weeks minimum. I just feel safer at 4 weeks. Now, depending on the amount of water that you use, will depend on how quickly it can be used. Logic states that the more water that you put into it, the more water that's going to have to evaporate out. The recipes that I give you will initially be the maximum amount of water. It will take longer to cure them. However, it will give you more time to work with the soap. The less water that you put into it, the quicker that it will come to trace and thicken up so that there's less time that can be done with it. There is something in the soap world that's called seizing, and it is exactly what you think it will. It will literally turn into soap on a stick. Your spoon will be congealed in there. You will not be able to work with it. You'll hardly be able to get it into a mold. It is unusable soap. It is a batch destroyed. Seizing will happen more often when there is less water involved, which is why I say start with the most amount of water that you can. Even to date, I typically work with more water, and I make that soap earlier so that it's ready when it comes time to sell. I don't like playing around with it. I have had one seize on me. It happened to be the one batch where I did not have a color, I didn't have a fragrance, I didn't have essential oils. It was absolutely nothing. The only thing different that I had put into it was beeswax, which is a hardening agent to the soap. It was requested of the customer that they wanted a plain beeswax soap. It was my first time ever working with beeswax, and I only had 3 weeks to cure. In the process of, I went ahead, I stick blended it, probably a little bit more than I should have, but less than I typically do most of my soaps when I'm mixing them. And sure enough, started to harden up instantly on me. I had to glop that in. It was thicker than mashed potatoes, which for soaping isn't good at all. You typically want it to be at like a thin cake batter consistency when you're working with it. So it was a little bit too thick for me. But these are all types that you work with typically. There is one other type. It uses a different type of lye. It's called potassium hydroxide. That makes liquid soap. You will make it up like you make hot process soap. It will be done, heated the entire process, and what's done and made and left with it is called a paste. That paste is then added to significant amounts of water that has a slight amount of borax to it, and that paste will thin itself back out. This is what makes traditional shampoos, hand soaps, liquid soaps, body washes, things like that. Now, what you're buying in the store is not traditional soap. The shampoo that you're getting is not used with lye. They are making it with more complex chemicals. They're making it with big, long names of ingredients. These are things that allow them to mimic the soap making process without having to use those ingredients. I don't like working with them now. I'm more of a fan of traditional soap-based shampoos, soap-based body washes, but that's because I make it. So, but this is your way of being able to make those things. I have not made that yet. I've been buying from other soap makers who make it. I will test it a few times, play with it. I will make a video for you of how we go about doing that, but I want to make sure that I know what I'm doing before I put a video on the internet showing you how it's done. So this is just a basic of what you need to know of the most cut and dry soap making rules. The next video coming up will be on the safety factors of making soap. So I hope I haven't bored you to death, but I wanted to give you a rudimentary idea of what it is that you're working with and the different levels of, and essentially what it is that what you're doing when you're creating soap. Because it sounds so weird to say that olive oil turns into soap, but it's the lye changing the fatty acid chains, and it creates glycerin when the lye is introduced. So yes, you can take olive oil and turn it into something that will make bubbles and be hard and make a bar of soap that will actually cleanse you. It sounds weird. It's the lye that does everything. Alright? So, I I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And look out for the next video, okay? Have a good day. Unlikely Prepper out.